Thank you for inviting me to the Fletcher School. I haven't been here for a long time. I think last time I was here, could you all hear me? Last time I was here was during the Vietnam War. And Noam Chomsky and I were invited to speak here on the war. And I think we were invited because the Fletcher School, which seemed to have a reputation at that time of turning out future people for the State Department and the CIA. I'm not saying the reputation was justified, of course. I would never say a thing like that. But that was the idea. And so Noam and I thought, I guess we're invited so that finally, for one evening, the students at Fletcher can get a different point of view. I have a feeling the Fletcher School is different these days. I don't know why, but just a feeling I have. Well, Gino Strada and I discovered one another, I guess. I was reading his book, Green Parrots, which I recommend to all of you. Green Parrots being, I think, as I just saw Green Parrots being the name given to these little landmines that have little wings on them and which are particularly deadly for children who pick them up and think they're toys. What struck me about the book Green Parrots was not just the very chilling accounts of the effects of war on ordinary people, and especially on children, but that Gino was not content with just telling that story, his diary, his experiences as a war surgeon. He wanted to go beyond that, and he wanted to do more than try to help the victims of war. He wanted to have us think about eliminating war itself, so that we wouldn't have generation after generation of war surgeons continuing to operate on victims of war. So he had asked me to write an introduction to the English edition of his book. The Italian edition has sold hundreds of thousands of copies in Europe and is very, very well known in Europe, but hasn't been yet well known in the United States. I wrote a little introduction to the English edition. And then Gino invited me to Rome. If you're invited to Rome, of course, you don't say no. And we spoke together in Rome, in a great municipal auditorium in Rome, and spoke about war. And so I guess what I want to do is talk to you about my own feelings, my own thoughts about war and the abolition of war. In fact, we had lunch today. We had this in Harvard Square, which is second to Rome. It's a place that is a very desirable place to go. And we had a sort of little meeting, luncheon meeting in Harvard Square to discuss this a campaign for the abolition of war. Not easy, right? Utopian, perhaps, but something that has to be put on the agenda of the human race at this point in history. However long it takes to accomplish, it has to be on the agenda, and people have to start talking about it. And so that's what we are trying to do. And I mean, war has, of course, the whole issue of war has particular meaning for the United States. And it's curious, isn't it? The United States has often been considered, and certainly it is presented to the world by our political leaders, as a peace-loving nation. But this peace-loving nation has been almost continuously at war since the end of World War II. And here we are. We have been in 2 wars during one presidential administration, which is not over yet. So war has a particular meaning for us, and it has a particular meaning for me. And I grew up, I suppose, reading romantic stories about war. I remember reading a series of sort of boys' books. It was called The Boy Allies, and it was about World War I. And it presented World War I as a wonderful occasion for friendship. And it had a French kid and an English kid and an American kid and a Russian kid, and they were the Boy Allies. And they had a great time. It wasn't until years later that I read about World War I, and read that 10 million men had died on the battlefields of World War I. 10 million. And at the end of it, no one could figure out what the war was about, really. I guess I was a teenager when my romantic notion of war was shattered. I read Dalton Trumbo's book, his novel, Johnny Got His Gun. I don't know how many of you know about it or have heard about it. How many of you have? Just, okay. The rest of you should read it. No, really. If you're going to read any one war novel, read Johnny Got His Gun, written by Dalton Trumbo. Trumbo was a Hollywood screenwriter. He became probably best known because he was one of the Hollywood 10 who went to prison for refusing to talk about his connections with the Communist Party. But let's not hold that against him, although the government did. But he was a remarkable writer. He won an Academy Award while blacklisted. He won an Academy Award after he had written a screenplay under an assumed name. You know, if any of you saw Woody Allen's movie The Front, you probably know that the blacklisted screenwriters were writing screenplays, and they're having their friends submit them, or they're submitting them under false names. And under one of these false names, Dalton Trumbo won an Academy Award for a screenplay. Johnny Got His Gun is a novel which brings the horror of war to its ultimate. It's about, well, he's writing this between the wars. He's writing this after World War I. And it's about a young American, 100% red-blooded American from a little town in the Midwest, who was sent off to war with the flags waving and the trumpets blaring, and the mayor of the town sending him off with his patriotic speech. And this is something that probably has been seen thousands of times in this country. The young local kid going off to war, and people proud of him and his family proud of him. But the novel is about a body being found on the battlefields of